digestion that took place up around this 1160 area where the market was, a number of analysts felt that this was going to be it, and then we were going to return back to the 1050 area or even lower, and this move higher was corrective. Well, that wasn't accurate. Based on the program is saying that this is going to continue higher, and then looking back at my daily trades that I put out between Monday and Wednesday every week, I have not put out a sell signal on the S&P 500 in almost 3 months. And that coincides with what's happening here, that this market has moved steadily higher, and I've moved higher with it. When it's pulled back, I've bought into that market, and I have never taken a counter trend position based on this triple EMA crossover. Now, point of interest here that everybody should be aware of, there are no standard moving averages on this screen. We have the 3-day predicted moving average, the 8-day predicted moving average, and the 18-day predicted moving average. These predicted moving average numbers you can only get from the Vantage Point software, and I tend to use them as pivot support and pivot resistance. Now, with that said, the S&P, we can see that it came all the way down here, touched this 18-day predicted moving average just above this 1180 mark, I guess, there in the last week or so. But this presented an excellent buying opportunity. That's when you can see here that this trade was actually activated, and the S&P 500 and then in turn moved higher. So we're sitting at about $1,610 profit on 10 contracts. Again, this is traded in, I'm trading it based on basis points, so 161 points, $10 a point translates into $1,610. Now, looking at the market here today, we can obviously see that Euro-US continues to sit in this range between 132 and 136. It seems to be moving back and forth in this area. Now, again, if we go back in here and have a look at the Euro-US, because this is a very popular trade. Now, before we go into the Euro-US, I just want to quickly touch base on what everybody should be watching here. When you're trading foreign exchange, you want to be watching gold, and you want to be watching New York light sweet crude oil or crude oil contracts in general. Now, looking at this, we can see that we've got some volatility in the crude market here, but the triple EMA crossover again has not taken place. So this suggests that crude is going to be limited. Now, pulling this up, we can see here that crude is now sitting at $83.56 a barrel. 84.35 is the high, 83.18 is the low. Now, in most cases, the crude oil contracts follow the equity markets, and they follow the other commodities very closely, specifically gold. Now, gold was a recommended trade for today also. I want to point that out. The reason why I'm suggesting that the crude oil and the gold contracts will move lower is because more or less that short-term crossover from Vantage Point on the US dollar index. Now, again, before we get into the euro, I'm just going to touch quickly on this gold contracts. Now, for today, basically what I was suggesting is this 1144.50 area, this 8-day predicted moving average from Vantage Point would likely contain the market. Now, right here we have the 3-day and the 6-day crossing over, the 3-day and the 8-day predicted moving average from Vantage Point crossing over each other on this time, basically this 3-month time frame using the triple EMA crossover. Now, this crossover can be considered a trigger or a sell signal. When a crossover takes place on a moving average, it acts as a buy or a sell signal. In this particular case, it's acting as a sell signal contract. So with that, when the market moved higher, what I suggested in today's recommended trades is that when gold moves higher, we can use that as an opportunity to get into potentially a short position. So again, looking at today, I'm going to pull this up so everybody can see this. Right here, XAU US dollar is gold contracts. We've hit 1144.19 is the high today. We can see now we're sitting at 1140.94. So anybody getting into those positions based around the recommended trade, that trade's actually progressing quite well. The S&P 500 again continues to move higher. We're at 1640. Now, again, probably some of you are wondering, what does this have to do with Forex? Well, it has a great deal to do with Forex. What the S&P 500 is doing, what oil is doing, and what gold is doing all relates into these different currency pairs. Now, looking at these currency pairs, we can see here that the US Canadian dollar, again, breaking below parity. Now, this is, again, can be usually related directly to commodities, but We'll touch base on that in a minute. For now, what I want to do is get back to that Euro-US. Before I jumped there around for a minute just so we could quickly look at things. Now, again, I'm going to pull up the Euro-US dollar. We've crossed over. The triple EMA has taken place. Crossover now. Point of interest here. Got this crossover almost at the exact same time as we did last month. So what I'm saying here is that this market is becoming somewhat repetitive. Now, we're getting ready to cross over to the downside again. We've got pivot resistance in this particular case. We're using these triple EMA crossovers. We're using the predicted moving averages. There's no standard moving averages crossover, but I will get into those. 135.19, 135.26, 135.18. This is telling me that there's resistance. These predicted moving averages are beginning to stack on top of each other in this area. Now, looking at the market today, we can see here that the market's hit 135.23. We're now sitting at 134.69, and we're struggling to hold this area, even though some of these other currencies are moving higher, specifically Australia, the CAD, and the New Zealand. The commodity currencies are starting to gain a little bit of momentum, but we can see normally that the euro would run on the coattails of those other currencies, but that's not happening in this particular case. So again, looking at the Euro-US, what does that translate for us today? Well, we've identified that area using those predicted moving averages, an area of pivot resistance. We've got 135.56 as a potential high, and we've got 134.31 as a potential low. This is the range from Vantage Point. Now, again, the predicted highs and the predicted lows for the day are just that. They're a daily indicator. They're very useful. But from a longer-term perspective, before we enter into a short-term position, we always want to make sure we're looking at the long-term picture, because what's happening in the short term may not be consistent with what's happening in the longer term, or even the medium term for that matter. So with that said, let's go in here. Let's have a look at the major crossovers from Vantage Point, the short, the medium, and the long term. The short is crossed over very clearly to the downside. That's a point of interest to us because it's telling us that it's in the short term it's going to move lower. Now in the medium term, this is where things get a little tricky. The medium term crossover is still to the upside. However, we can see that the predicted moving average is turned and making its way towards the standard moving average, which is the crossover indicator and the sell signal. Now looking at the long term crossover, again, the predicted moving average is the blue line here. It's getting ready to turn and move towards the simple moving average. So there's a lot of activity between the 135.50 and the 135 area. So this is certainly of interest to us on intraday, even on intraday trading. Now we've identified that 134.31 is the predicted low from Vantage Point today. Now let's have a look at the predicted true strength indicator from Vantage Point. What's it telling us? We can see that it's running completely flat along with the triple EMA crossover. So this is warning us that the Euro-US may not be the best currency pair to trade here today. And the reason I'm saying that is that we're looking for a clean signal. So here we have the short term in one direction, the long term and the medium term in another direction, and the predicted TSI running